Hello and welcome to Miniature Adventures, and this week I wanted to talk about wargaming in Austerity, how to play for less. So unless you come from old money or as bent as an MP, then it's very likely that you're going to be struggling with money at the moment. Most people seem to be. Certainly in my day job, I'm encountering a lot of people who are struggling an enormous amount at the moment, and you know that works across the spectrum of incomes. So you know, wargaming can be an expensive hobby. I don't think it has to be, but it can be. Maybe not compared to other hobbies, but then you know I've written and I've done some videos before on wargaming on a budget, and it's worth reprising some of that information and talking about it. You know, we are on the verge of an official recession, although to be honest, if anyone who lives in the UK will know, it feels like a recession already. So official or otherwise, everyone seems to be struggling with the cost of living, bills going up faster than you can count, and wages not keeping track with them. So how do you justify spending money on your hobby, and is there a way of doing that hobby in a slightly more economical way? Can you tighten your belt with a hobby like wargaming? Well, some of the advice that I'm going to suggest is obvious. Things like play with what you already have in your collection. You know, if you're like me, I've got several periods painted and more or less complete, maybe not entirely complete, but more or less. Certainly enough for me to get out and have a game with. So, you know, making use of what you already have. I know part of the fun of the hobby is painting and buying new miniatures, and we'll come to that in a minute. But you know, if things genuinely are really tight and you can't afford to spend anything on your hobby, then don't overlook the fact that you've got stuff already painted sitting there waiting to be played with. Even if it's a period that you've not played for a while because you'd sort of gone lukewarm on it, I'd rather play a game I was lukewarm about than not play at all. So you know, it's well worth getting out, digging out some of your old collections and seeing if you can reignite your love for them, because you have to. Then following on the heels from that, play with somebody else's stuff. Again, I belong to a loose collection of friends, all have their own collections. Stuart's collection, I've mentioned it before, the guy's a megalomaniac. There isn't a period, no man or beast that he doesn't own in multiple scales. So you know, if you haven't got your own figures to play with, get out there and try and get some games with your friends' figures. You know, I would imagine that most people, as I mentioned earlier, most ordinary people will have been affected to a certain extent by rising bills, rising food prices and all the rest. So no one's not going to get it if you say, look, I can't afford to buy something new, or I can't pay for that. You know, I don't think anyone, not anyone who's a good, proper friend that is, would make you feel bad because you can't afford to put the tenner in the kitty or whatever it might be, or to buy a new army or join in a new game. Most gamers that I've met, pretty much all gamers that I've met, are more than happy not only to share their enthusiasm of the hobby, but to share their armies and get other people to play with their toy soldiers. So you know, if you can't buy anything new and you can't invest in your hobby, see if someone else will let you play with their stuff. You know, just for that variety. This is temporary, hopefully. Things will change, they invariably do. You know, this is getting you through a rough patch. It's got to be better than dropping out of the hobby entirely. And then along the same sort of lines as play with other people's stuff is join a club. You're playing with other people's stuff and other people. You know, if money's tight and you know you're really stressed and you don't know where you can put money for your hobby or indeed any other things, social activities that cost next to nothing, being part of a group of friends, for instance, that meet up, it's good for your mental health. It'll help you get through a very tough period. So, you know, although I've never been a club member myself, I'm part of the Rejects, obviously. I've mentioned them many times. You know, a great group of people, a good group of friends, and definitely good for mental health and getting a laugh. You forget a lot of worries when you're around the table having a bit of banter and pushing some toy soldiers around. So if you need to, see if you can get to join a club or a group of friends so that you can share resources, play with other people's stuff, and play more economically. Now, yes, inevitably I'm going to bang on about playing 6mm, painting some as we speak. This is a very cheap way of playing war games. It can still add up if you're buying a whole army, but say you've got an existing 6mm army and you want to add a unit, it's pennies really. Even cheaper for 2mm. Although I haven't quite gone to that level of insanity yet. But the point is if you go small, you can continue to play, and as I mentioned before, it uses less space, less money because it's less expensive to buy initially. There's a lot of stuff available on eBay, cheap, so there's an even cheaper option than buying direct from the manufacturer, although obviously I would always advocate supporting your manufacturer if you can. They rely on our sales to keep going, and they, like everyone else, are going to be affected by increasing fuel costs, and postage and everything else, and wages and all the other pressures that a business has at a time when people perhaps are spending less because their own belts are being tightened. So if you can afford to buy from your manufacturer, please support them. But there are alternatives. There's lots and lots of stuff available on eBay and other sites, so you can usually find something. Maybe it's not exactly what you wanted, but it scratches that itch. It gives you something to paint and to work on, using existing stocks of stuff as far as you can, so that you can continue to play and paint at relatively low cost, if not zero, for a period of time, until things improve. And I'd also say it's worth, and I'm sure many of you already do this, but try to be resourceful. Find alternative things that you can use for terrain and so on. I've always said that no matter what sort of shopping trip my wife drags me on, bless her, I can turn every shopping trip into a supply run. I will be on the lookout for odd items that I might be able to utilise, either as building material or as terrain items. If I cut that off and paint it, I could use that as a hill or whatever it might be. There's or toys out of the band store and things like that. And go, I can use that. There's always little things. Even if you come back with a little bit of glue or something like that, you can turn every shopping trip into a supply run. And there are cheap alternatives. I mean, I buy most of my super glue from the pound store. There's very little point in buying the very expensive super glues, for instance, except for joints that absolutely must hold together. But for the majority of my figures, when they're mounted on sticks, so like these fellas, mounted on sticks ready to be primed and painted, I use cheap super glue, so a pan for like 5 tubes, because it breaks off easy. These will come off the sticks relatively easy once I finish painting and varnishing them. So there's always things that you can do to reduce the cost, but it requires perhaps a little bit more creative thinking, a little bit more resourcefulness. And then again, something we probably all do, but make the use of the internet as much as you can. There's a ton of good ideas out there, and hopefully this video might be one of them eventually. But there's a lot of advice and suggestions and practical tips from other gamers. Go on forums and so on. It's a great way of scratching that hobby itch without using any money. If you've got your internet anyway, it's not going to cost you anything extra to go and spend some time exploring hobby websites. And if you're watching this video or coming at this video via my blog, then you're already doing that. But there's always more sites, more stuff to discover. I spend a lot of time online, probably more than my wife would like, and I'm still discovering new stuff all the time, every day. There's some new site, and I'm bookmarking it because I think that's interesting, or it's got something new to say. And gamers like us that have blogs and vlogs and so on, we're constantly putting out tips, ideas, tutorials. There's lots of ideas out there, so don't overlook. If you can't meet people face to face down a club or a hobby group, don't overlook the internet as a source of inspiration for cheap ideas. Now, this piece of advice I would say use very cautiously. Rationalise your collection. Sell what you really don't need, and reinvest that money back in your hobby so you've got a bit of money. I mean, it's got to be used very carefully, because what you don't want is seller's regret the moment you've flogged it and posted it off, or given it to somebody else. I've done that a few times myself, and gone, I wish I hadn't sold that particular collection. But there may genuinely be some stuff in your collection that you could dispose of. Stuff that you're never ever going to play with again, or hasn't been painted, for instance, and you've decided you're not doing that army, then there's no loss in bagging it up, flogging it on eBay. Any money you make can obviously go straight back into your hobby, or indeed paying off bills if that's what the priorities are. We could all probably do with a bit of rationalising. This room is absolutely bursting at the seams. I could probably do a bit of rationalising, and not for money reasons. But let's face it, we've probably all got stuff that we could, if we looked carefully, we could probably find something that we could sell. And following on from that, obviously using things like eBay, bring and buys at shows, boot sales. They're all great places not only to sell stuff, but to find cheap stuff. Bring and buys, maybe sometimes the prices are a little bit inflated, but I've found some brilliant bargains over the years. It's just setting yourself a budget before you do anything like that. Don't allow yourself to get swept away in the moment. Very easy. We all suffer from a bit of shiny-itis, and we have a tendency to purchase stuff that perhaps we didn't need. So you have to be a little bit more disciplined with your spending if you're going to visit a bring and buy. But there's certainly a great way of you disposing of collection, and not only are you making back a bit of money, but your collection's going to another gamer. That for me is a part of the rationale of rationalising a collection and selling items. Now, lastly, I'd like to say that I think it's important not to give up the hobby entirely. We've talked many times, and I did earlier in this video, about the mental health benefits of staying in the hobby, staying connected to friends, having a craft, something to occupy your mind and distract you. Now, if your money's really tight, and as I say, I've visited some people who are really struggling through my day job. We all need a distraction, and I think that wargaming, particularly if you're an established wargamer, can, with a collection and stuff around you already, you can play for some considerable period of time without spending a penny, and still enjoy your hobby. So I do think it's important to stay in that hobby, stay engaged with your friends. No one's going to mock you for not having any money, because we're all in the same boat, or at least most of us are at the moment. Well, a slightly long video today, but I hope you found that interesting, and of course if you did, please like, subscribe and share. And if you want to keep up to date with my weekly videos, please hit the bell notification icon. So until next week, stay safe, keep gaming, and look after yourself. Keep rolling high.